So I want to start you with the thought that many of the UK's oldest and most famous schools are actually outside London and the South East. Schools such as Rugby, Bryanston, Oundle, Marlborough, Millfield and Cheltenham, to give you just some examples. And I'm obviously here today to try and encourage you, parents, to think a little more broadly when selecting schools to come and visit. If you step an hour or two away from London, then your options really do open up, I think. London and the South East is really a unique market when it comes to schools, and there are some really good alternatives out there which are worthy of consideration. With improved transport links, with quicker trains, with dual carriageway upgrades and the like, all these schools are becoming closer, and I think they will continue to do so for the future. There are actually around 70,000 boarders in independent schools in the UK. 30,000 are in London and the South East, so the majority, about 40,000 or so, are actually further afield. In the South West, for example, there are 15,000 boarders, and Cheltenham, at the centre of the South West, is well known as a centre of educational excellence and a centre for really good independent schools. And it is, as Charles was saying, a lovely, lovely town for people to be educated in. So step away from London and these options really open up. And you will know that competition in London and the South East is, in certain places, at boiling point. And I know there'll be more about this tomorrow at the show. The media is reporting that some children are taking as many as 7 different entrance exams. So I'm calling for people to open up their vista and think of other options, not least because a great deal of anxiety and stress is being created for parents and for pupils where it's simply not needed. There are some fantastic schools out there, and I'd encourage you to cast your net a little more widely. It's certainly true that children, nearly all children, are actually very, very happy in their senior schools, whatever schools they might be, and they thrive. And if you look beyond the London radius, there are some real gems, from academically selective to not so selective, all-round schools to ones with very specific emphases, such as sport or outward bound. There are all boarding schools, weekly boarding, flexi boarding, boarding in day. There are all boys, all girls and co-ed. You name it, it's there, and they're still within relatively easy reach. And these schools, in my experience, are trying their very best to make it as easy as possible for parents. At Cheltenham, we're offering supervised train travel to London for our younger boarders in years 7 and 8 at the prep school. In the senior school, we've got about 30 or 40 London families with boarding children. The teenagers tell me one of the advantages of this is that on the train journey home, they get a really good chance actually to catch up with work, to do some prep, and to get some of those tasks out of the way so they don't have to tackle those things when they're at home. And the other thing to bear in mind, we were talking about this earlier, is for boarding places in particular, there is quite a bit of help with fees available. And I would like to encourage parents to ask more about that and be more demanding in their questions of schools, in the form of asking about bursaries and scholarships. And you might be pleasantly surprised to see actually what's out there. At Cheltenham, for example, we're providing over £2 million a year in fees assistance to our pupils. So let me just turn to the question of what's being offered by these boarding schools beyond the South East, and perhaps give you a clue as to the sort of things that parents might be looking for. I mean, the first thing to say is that all good schools, good boarding schools in particular, should be trying to offer that more rounded approach, that complete education. And that's what the extra time we have with the pupils enables us to do. Surely our goal, above all else, has got to be to produce givers, not takers, to produce young people who are resourceful, who are leaders, who are team players, and teenagers who are emotionally literate. We want them to be confident but not arrogant. and we want people who can flourish in their future lives. And I mean flourish in that broadest classical sense of the word, to be a whole and complete person. Another thing which is worth mentioning is that often these schools have a fantastic space. And I think this is really significant. Green spaces, trees, fresh, unpolluted air. These are things that we know contribute to adolescent well-being, to balance and perspective. And I'm convinced that surroundings have a really important part to play. And I don't think there's anything better than Cheltenham for that. At my school, we run a well-being programme for all the Year 9 pupils when they first arrive in the senior school. And we're encouraging them to take notice, to take note of their surroundings and to appreciate beauty in buildings and in nature. And, you know, that doesn't always come naturally to a 13 or 14-year-old boy, but it's nevertheless important. And I think that aesthetic awareness does lead to a broader sense of happiness and fulfillment in the long run for them. I think in some cases, schools may be offering a broader social mix and a range of backgrounds. Certainly a more geographically diverse range of pupils and families from within the UK. Schools outside London South East tend to draw from a wider pool, and geographically so too. And they may also be offering a wider international mix, but this can vary considerably from school to school, so it does need proper investigation. But to have about 15% international contingent from around 20 different countries, as we have at my school, I think is a great balance, and it provides an exciting educational perspective for the pupils, but it does need to be carefully considered by parents. Some schools outside London and the South East may also be offering a different balance in their curriculum, a balance where academic results certainly matter, but perhaps within a broader perspective and with wider opportunities for children to be involved with life outside the classroom. A life where the A star is certainly an important and inevitable requirement of life for some future destinations, but it is also part of a broader educational offer. And crucially, the children are all the happier for it. So please don't let geography be a block. Venture further afield, take a look and think. I think you will be extremely impressed with what you find out there and what's on offer. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you very much, Dr. Peterken. I'm just going to ask a question which I think gets a little bit to the crux of this. Isn't it the case that parents now want to see their children really as much as they can, even when they're at boarding school? And if you send them to a school 2 hours, 2.5 hours from London, that is going to lessen the amount of contact time they have. So what do you think are the advantages of spending more time at school? Is it that important to have more parental time? Do you think these parents are justified in their concern?
I completely understand what you're saying. I think, you know, there is, as I said earlier, there is no question that the boarding life means that parents are somehow not involved. They are very much involved. If you think of it this way, think about your children and how much they enjoy their time, perhaps outside of day school, at sports clubs, activities, sleepovers, that kind of thing. And we're just really talking about an extension of that very fulfilling life that goes on, but within one place, under one roof. And as I say, parents are extremely involved often with their boarders. We would see most of our parents who are UK parents, you know, in the school once a week or once every other week watching matches and being involved. It's just the great richness which they get when they're fizzing off other teenagers 24 hours a day, which is such a selling point for parents. It is so different from the old model of boarding. But there's a great advantage to all the things they can do and the wonderful experiences they get. And they are learning with each other to be resilient, they're learning tolerance, they're learning leadership. It's a fantastic offer, and it's why so many parents, I think, are interested in it. When I was talking to somebody down on the floor earlier, a parent who was saying, you know, they get a hard time in the office from some of their colleagues who can't understand what boarding's about. And the question was something along the lines of, well, you know, are they quite unhappy to start with? And I remember that old process in boarding schools as well. You know, it might take a term or several months for them to become happy. Well, you know, my experience of the people who join me is that actually they're happy from the off. You know, they know the other children they're starting with before they come to school. They get a great deal of contact with the school before they start. You know, parents are not going to pay money for their children to be unhappy. And boarding parents are no different. It's an obvious point to make, but I think it's one that's sometimes missed.
Can I just make one more point? And it'd be very interesting to hear your views on this. We find that there is a concern that the schools that are further away from London appear to have lower results. I mean, they're lower in the league tables. They don't seem to be as academically focused in terms of their statistics as those schools which are closer to London, and I hope you will debunk that concern immediately.
Well, thank you. Yeah, I mean, it's very, very important that everyone understands that, you know, when you're measuring academic results, there are essentially two things that are being considered. You can go for your raw data. You can go for your league table, which measures percentage of A star and A. But remember, that has absolutely no input in terms of the ability level of children when they come into the school in the first place. And this is the key thing that's missed. And the key phrase is value add. You know, what are we doing in the school to add academic value to the children that say arrive at me at 13, right up until their A-level results at 18? You know, and that's what I take very seriously, because I want to be, my target for my staff is to be in the top 10% of independent schools when it comes to value add. I'm not talking about all schools, I'm talking about the independent sector. It's supposed to be, and are, some of the finest schools in the world. So, yes, it's true that on the headline figures, some of the schools outside London are less achieving. But of course, that's really because they're less academic selective, which goes back to my message at the beginning of this about this bubble that's created, particularly in London, and sometimes, you know, in its immediate environment, which is not necessary, because there's fantastic education going on. And I have children who achieve fantastic results, suites of A stars, but not all of them do. But that's fine, because I also have some people who come to me at 13 who perhaps are not flying academically, and they make fantastic progress. And don't underestimate the confidence they get also from being educated that well and from making that progress, which is fantastic.
So what you're saying, Dr. Peterken, is that if you have an academic child, it really doesn't matter if that child goes to a relatively unselective school.
That's exactly what I'm saying, provided you have a school which is able to stretch and challenge the more able, that has a fantastic programme, say in the sixth form and in the GCSE years, of enrichment, lectures, talks, visiting speakers, so important to inspire, opportunities for them to get their A-star grade to do well, but actually, what are we teaching them about love of learning? Who's coming into that school to like the touch paper? And it can be anybody from, you know, somebody coming who works for a charity in caring for animals, to a politician, to a leading sportsman. You never quite know, when we have a weekly sixth form lecture programme, you never quite know who it's going to be, who inspires which of the boys and girls that are sitting in that room. But how often I see people in later life who say, I got started in this because when I was at school, X or Y came to speak about this, and it just was something that really drew me in. And when I finish these lectures, and I thank the visiting speakers, when I see my students staying behind to ask questions, to find out more, to introduce themselves, to sometimes push for work experience or, you know, further contact, then I know that that process of inspiration is going on. And those things aren't measured in league tables.
Thank you very much. So let's have some questions, please. If you've got some very specific questions that relate to your child, it might be a better idea to talk to Dr. Peterken afterwards. I'm sure he'll have a few minutes for you. So, thank you.
Dr. Peterken, how does Cheltenham College deal with the child who's been at a day prep school, somewhere has decided they want to board, and confuse the parents with that request? How well do they settle when they suddenly start full boarding? It seems to be chalk to cheese.
So the experience of starting boarding for the first time can happen at any age. And in fact, at 13 years old, where we start our boarders, not by all means, not all pupils by any means have boarded before. I would say that some have done a little bit of a taster here or there, but there are plenty who are brand new boards. So how does the process work? Well, one thing that certainly doesn't happen is that they turn up on September the 1st to a place they've never been to before, to a room they've never been in before, to a housemaster or house mistress they've never met before, and to a group of children they don't know. Because schools, or good boarding schools, now have a runway, if you like, of events which lead up to the start of this process. So, you know, in our school, we start with the first visit, where a child comes and looks round, and they'll meet the housemaster. They'll then come back for our entrance day in year 7. And we don't just get everyone in and sit in front of a computer and say, right, do this test and we'll let you know. We actually spend an entire day with them. So that they do a little bit of, in our case, they do a discussion group with me. We debate newspaper articles, they do some math problem solving in groups. But they also spend time in the houses, meeting the other boys or girls they're going to be with, meeting some of the house staff. And then in the summer of year 8, the summer of year 7, the year before they join us, they come for a 24-hour day or experience day where they stay overnight. And then in the summer of year 8, they come into the school again for a Sunday day with parents and family. I'll give you a little example of this. My daughter started boarding at my school a year ago. And as often parents do who've been through the same thing, you have flashes back to your own memory and experience. And I remember going to Eton College, age 13. I'd never set foot in the boarding house before the day I started. It was pretty daunting, I tell you. You remember that. My daughter, on the morning that she was due to start her boarding career, you know, her phone was having messages in from the other girls that were starting, well, we've arrived, where are you? And she knew those girls really well because of those different events they'd been to, they'd exchanged details. Actually, we'd been down in Cornwall and they'd met up on holiday with a couple of them. It's just such a world away from that old experience of being dropped off and left. So that's when you get started, before you get started. Of course, then when you get into the boarding itself, you find teams of people now in boarding houses supporting the boarders, matrons, resident tutors, young members of staff, housemaster's wives, and parents regularly in touch, particularly early on, because they're worried about how things are going. So much more open dialogue and communication.
Thank you. Another question?
I went to a day school that was academically selective myself, and it did what it was supposed to do. It got me to my professional life. And I have what I think is an academic daughter, and I want her to experience what I feel I missed out on. Yes, I got to be the successful surgeon that I am today, but I didn't do jewellery class and I didn't do horse riding. But how can I look at a school like yours, find that the league tables are not what another school in London is, and say, yeah, that's the good school for my daughter. If she's academic enough, she will achieve, but she will get to horse ride. I'm not sure if I even make sense in my question.
No, that makes absolutely perfect sense. And that's a conversation that I will have on a regular basis with parents who come to see me. And I will point to, talk earlier about the sort of academic enrichment programme. I mean, often it's a good idea to come to schools and ask them to break down a little bit into their headline results. So, I would say to you something like, well, I've got just under 50 students who are going to get 5 A stars or more at GCSE. I've got 30 who get 7 A stars. So, in other words, I'd say your daughter, she came to me, obviously we've got 6 or 7 sets in the year group. She's going to be in a cohort of people who are all going to be aiming for, that sort of high echelon result. So, in one sense, an argument for saying that highly academic environment, that select environment exists. It just exists within, a section of the school. And of course, we then have the added flexibility of people perhaps being in more appropriate groups if they have a profile where they are superb at science and maths, but actually, say, English and history or humanities is something that they're not strong in. So I think that will be one area. I've certainly got students, I think, who perhaps if they went to a very, very selective school, would not do as well academically. They would still get in, they might be, say, at the bottom of a very selective school. But that brings issues of confidence, for example. I have the opportunity with we have a reasonable spread at our school, we're not entirely comprehensive, but that gives great opportunity, I think, for people to be boosted in their confidence and not feel, right at the bottom end. So that can be an issue. And the other thing I'd say about the broader curriculum you were talking about, Julie, don't underestimate what a wonderful impact that can have on the academic. I mean, that sense of achievement, that breadth, that sense of doing other things, it just floods into the classroom. If I think of boys I teach who, come in on a Monday morning because they scored a winning try for the D team or whatever, they're just walking a bit taller. I can start the lesson by talking to them about that, encouraging them, saying well done, and that just feeds into the awful test they're about to have or whatever it is, So.
Dr. Peterken, I'm afraid many parents take quite a functional approach. Is there any evidence when it comes to UCAS and the university applications to British universities? And I know for a fact it helps with American universities, but are British universities increasingly looking at the extracurricular profile, or are they still really focusing on academics?
That's a really good question. I think sadly, if you think you're going to get into a highly selective university course because you play rugby to a high level or what have you, that's just not going to happen. You've got to be realistic about it. What you've got to do is you've got to shape, to frame your experiences, to talk about how they assist you in what you want to do at university. So, it's not the fact that you play rugby and you score all these tries, but it's the fact that you've actually combined a busy life, that you are used to multitasking, that it enables you to prioritise. You just spend so much time doing this that actually you know how to put work first. You're a very organised person. I think probably where the breadth of extracurricular experience that we can offer comes in more, arguably, is actually when it comes to the first job application. And talking about, and I talk to employers a lot, and talking about what you have done at school. It's not a list of the things you've been in, but it is what difference did you make? And this is what we're working really hard last year to the moment. It is, I'm not that interested in all the different activities you did, but how did you change the school? What ideas did you have that, were then put into action, if you like? How did you make a positive impact on the people around you? And in our case, for example, we're particularly trying to get more of our students out of school, doing things in the community, which, for teenagers at 16, 17, 18, brilliant experiences actually for later on.
There's actually some very interesting research from Oxford University which demonstrates that the Blues sports undergraduates, who are effectively professional sports people with full-time sports programs, get better degrees than the non-Blues sports people. So you give a job to a busy person. Any more questions, please? Just getting a microphone to you.
Hi, so looking around the stands at the show, there's a strong feeling of the need for support in well-being, looking at that side of life. You talked about value added earlier. I just wonder what your thoughts are on how we can analyse the effectiveness of the provision for emotional well-being in schools.
You're absolutely right that schools have really switched on to the importance of adolescent well-being, for want of a better description, a better term, particularly the last 5 or 6 years. How do we measure the success of that? I think that's a tricky one. I mean, if my governors are asking me that, as they often do, I would point to things like pupil survey, which we do regularly, parental survey, and other indicators of internally. But actually, I think, particularly in the programme that we're launching, we're looking for more, because we're looking to lay down some foundations for much, much later on. And when I talk to my new parents when they start, I say actually we're trying to also create people who are going to be able to have secure and fulfilling relationships in their personal lives in their 20s and 30s and 40s. Now, how do we measure that? Well, it's difficult longitudinally to measure something that's going to go forward into what I hope is decades of happy life. But I think it's a really good question to ask. Because I really, really want to think that the boarders that are leaving my school are, the benefits of what they're doing with us now are going to last for their lifetime.
Thank you. I have a question over here.
It's not so much of a question really, but I'm actually a life coach for children.
Yeah.
So it's music to my ears when I hear about well-being really placed really, high up on the agenda, just as well as the academic side of things. because, as it's been shown, that if children are happy and have a grasp of great life skills, then they're able to perform fantastic in their academic life as well. And I basically work with a selection of various books where children are able to tap into various characters, and I range from 5 till the age of 21, but it's great to hear that schools are really incorporating the well-being side of things, because often for me it's been able to get the schools to be able to incorporate that within their curriculum, and often it's just been PSHE but just on the sidelines, not really incorporating it. So I really welcome that, and I'd like to work more with schools to be able to do that.
Well, I'll give you an example. I've got my personal academic tutors who are asking the children, all of them, where are you taking risks in your school curriculum? And trying to start a conversation about the fact that putting yourself out of your comfort zone, taking some risks, and failing even, is a really important experience to go through. And I know it sounds bizarre, but I'm kind of encouraging them to, actually all of them, to go and fail at something. Because we know that failure, and then what you do about that afterwards, is absolutely integral in personal development. And if kids have not done that, they can come horribly unstuck later on. And dare I say it, there are some fantastically high-achieving academic performers, 12 A stars, GCSE, 5 A stars at A level, going to some of the top universities in the world. The wheels can come off the first thing that happens in the workplace when they get exposed to real human life.
Great. I think we have time for one more question. Any further questions? No. Right. Well, Dr. Peterken, I think we'll wrap it up there. As I said at the beginning, Cheltenham is a wonderful town. It's a real educational centre. I'm slightly biased because I went to the junior school of Cheltenham College, and a fantastic preparatory school it is. If you haven't been to Cheltenham, I really do suggest you go and visit, because there are many other very strong independent schools in the area. We're extremely grateful to Dr. Peterken for taking the time to come and talk to us, and I think you've made those points extremely clearly about the value of a full boarding education in a relatively unselective school in a less built-up environment. So thank you very much, and I hope you all go to see him in Cheltenham.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.
How was the sandwich?